So this morning we're in New Smyrna Beach at Old Fort Park. There's a lot of interesting history here. So let's go on a journey together.
Hi, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm walking up to the Old Fort Park Archeological Site in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. And this is a really beautiful little park. New Smyrna Beach is on the east coast of Florida. We have the Atlantic Ocean right here and a beach with access to that. And this specific park actually overlooks New Smyrna's intercoastal waterway. So it's a river that also meets up with an inlet to the ocean. So lots of interesting waterways here. The location that I'm at today was added to the U.S. National Register of Historic Places in July of 2008. There's been a lot of mystery that surrounds this location. There's some different stories about what's happened here in history, and some of it's unusual for such a geographically small site. It's unusual that this site has seen a really disproportionate share of sort of calamity, chaos, and destruction over several centuries, and there are really interesting stories to be told about what happened there. So as we look at the foundation walls, you would not be mistaken to think that these were the ruins of an 18th century Spanish fort. These ruins are eerily reminiscent of the Castillo de San Marcos in St. Augustine, Florida. No one can definitively answer the question as to the origin of the original coquina structure. Some historians have proposed that the massive ruins are the remnants of an 18th century British period residence or some sort of commercial structure. But there are a few things that we do know to be fact about this site. During the 1850s, a man named John Sheldon and his wife built a large 60-room hotel on this site's coquina foundation. The hotel sat peacefully on this riverfront in New Smyrna up until July of 1863. Coincidentally, this exact month and year was the same month and year that General Meade and General Lee were engaged in one of the deadliest battles of the U.S. Civil War at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Now, within the same month, July of 1863, the Union Navy had been shelling the town of New Smyrna Beach, which means they were launching explosive projectiles from ships to the land. And during the course of this shelling, Mr. and Mrs. Sheldon's hotel was actually destroyed in an explosion. And this explosion was a result of that Union bombardment. How this explosion was started was Mr. Sheldon was storing gunpowder in the basement of the hotel. And I think the lesson to take from this is do not keep gunpowder in the basement of your hotel, at least a lot of it. So Mr. and Mrs. Sheldon were not present in New Smyrna Beach at this time when the shelling was going on. They had fled prior as a result of sort of the imminent danger of the Civil War. After the Civil War ended, the Sheldon family actually returned to New Smyrna Beach and they rebuilt the hotel on this same spot, using the exact same foundation that we're looking at here in the footage. Their hotel remained in operation until 1896 when it was demolished. As we look a bit further back in history, we may gain a clearer view of where these ruins may have originated from, well before Mr. and Miss Sheldon had built their hotel on the site. At first glance, it does look like the ruins might be from a Spanish fort, but it's actually generally believed that they were built by a Scottish doctor named Andrew Turnbull. In 1768, Dr. Turnbull established a settlement in this area of New Smyrna Beach on behalf of England. The doctor arrived on the shores of Florida by ship, and he brought with him around 1,500 Greeks, Corsicans, Italians, and Minorcans. He had hoped to start a new colony in the area, and the idea was that they would grow crops like indigo, sugarcane, and hemp. However, the odds were against him, and numerous factors thwarted his ability to accomplish these goals. One of the main reasons was the settlers that he had brought over here to New Smyrna with him had an extremely tough time. They didn't have enough food. They suffered shortages of this food, and they were attacked by local Indians. The heat and the mosquitoes led to various maladies. Their housing was subpar, and they labored nearly nonstop under all of these harsh conditions. And it was all of these culminating factors that led to rampant illness and death among the settlers. So they did reach a tipping point in their ability to endure these conditions, and the settlers ended up abandoning this site and colony in 1777, and they actually headed north for St. Augustine, Florida. Now, around a year after the colonists left, Dr. Turnbull himself also threw in the proverbial towel. He left for Charleston, South Carolina, and he left behind the remnants of the colony. He even left behind his partially built mansion. The modern-day consensus is that these Turnbull ruins are actually the remnants of his abandoned mansion. And it's rather bleak to think about this end to this endeavor and what likely inspired the hopes and dreams of not only Dr. Turnbull, but the hopes and dreams of the average man or woman settler who had hoped to have a life here and raise a family here in early New Smyrna Beach. Now, the way that this structure appears and where it's located has led to a lot of speculation about its history and what it may have been used for. It's unlikely that we'll ever know for sure if this were a colonial church, this were Dr. Turnbull's mansion, maybe this was a shipbuilding site, or maybe this was even an early iteration of the original Castillo de San Marcos. Local historians have given input as to potential origin, and according to Mr. Gary Luther, there are numerous reasons to believe that this structure is actually from Spanish times. He wrote a book about the history of New Smyrna Beach, and he notes in this book the very strong similarities between the Turnbull ruins in Old Fort Park and the Castillo de San Marcos in St. Augustine, Florida. The ruins are actually made of coquina, and if you don't know what coquina is, it is a rock that is made out of tiny shell pieces. And coquina was what was also used to build the massive Spanish fort in St. Augustine over a period of time in the late 1600s. It would have taken a ton of time and work to build something as big as what we see at the Turnbull ruins out of coquina. Based on what we know about Dr. Turnbull's colonists and how they ended up really sick and exhausted, it seems unlikely that they would have been capable of building such a large structure. There's also additional evidence of a Spanish origin. The fort's foundation and exterior walls have buttresses, which suggests that the structure was meant for defense. And by the way, if you're wondering what a buttress is, it is really just a form of a reinforcing support that was used to strengthen bastions or forts or castles or military structures. And one thing we do know is that houses of this time were not built with this sort of fortification, and they were generally built closer to smaller bodies of water that are inland. There's also another very interesting tidbit of history on this site. And this bit of history occurred about 20 years after the Civil War conflict had destroyed Mr. Sheldon's hotel. A sugar planter named Thomas Stamps actually started a sugar plantation on this very location. And it seems as if the location may have a curse because his endeavors did not last very long. Seminole Indians actually burned his plantation to the ground in 1835, and that quickly ended the business pursuits of Thomas Stamps in that area. If you want to know more about this location or how to get here, the Turnbull ruins are located at Old Fort Park and on North Riverside Drive. This is near downtown New Smyrna Beach. If you plug Old Fort Park into Google Maps or your Apple Maps, it should give you driving directions to the site. There is not an entrance fee, and there is ample parking nearby. It's a really picturesque location that sits a bit away from the hustle and bustle of those larger historic sites. There are almost no crowds in this park at any time, and there's ample room for your children to run and play. You can sit on a bench and take in the serenity of it all and the beautiful view of the river. I like to go down there and sort of take in those river views and just enjoy that calm breeze that's coming in. So I hope that this video provided a little bit of intrigue and a little bit of context to what's happened right here in New Smyrna Beach where we live. Thank you for coming along with me on this journey through history, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.